Sonoma City Council, Wednesday, December 4th, 2024, to order. Those of you in the audience, please turn off your cell phones, anything that might make noise. The meeting has been called to order. Items for discussion. Item 2.1, a resolution declaring the City of Sonoma's intent to transition from at-large elections to district-based elections for City Council pursuant to the Elections Code 10,000, hang on here, 10010, period. Including approving the tentative timeline and delegating authority to the city manager to select, approve, and execute an agreement with a professional demographer in an amount not to exceed $50,000.
Mr. Mayor, would it be a problem to do roll calls just for the record so we have a...
You know, that is a lovely idea, and did I miss that somehow?
No, it was not
Thank
listed.
you, okay. All right. Could we get roll call before we proceed?
Vice Mayor Ferrer-Rivas.
Present.
Councilmember Lowe.
Here.
Councilmember Wellander.
Here.
Mayor Gurney.
Here.
Thank you. We can let the record show that Councilmember Dean is not present this evening.
All right, thank you very much. So back to items for discussion. I've read it. You have it in front of you. So who's going to present the report?
I'm happy to present this item. Thank you, Mayor Gurney, members of the City Council, David Ruderman, your City Attorney. Before you is a resolution of intent to transition to district-based elections. This is a process that is allowed under the California Voting Rights Act that allows cities to move from an at-large system of election to a by-district form of election. This is something that's been going on in the state for a number of years since the legislature passed the California Voting Rights Act in the early 2000s. It mainly was impacting larger cities, and for a long time, smaller cities thought that it wasn't really ever going to affect them. There's nothing in the Voting Rights Act that exempts smaller cities. And recently, as you know, Healdsburg received a demand letter from an attorney, a well-known Malibu-based attorney, who sends letters out indicating that he has reason to believe that a city's voting system violates the California Voting Rights Act, and under the Act, a city can avoid the cost of litigation and limit their attorney's fees to $30,000 if they move to districts within a shortened amount of time, about 90 days, which is what I understand Healdsburg is in the process of doing. If a city adopts a resolution of intent, which is what's before the council this evening, prior to receiving a demand letter like that, then the city does not have to pay a Malibu-based or any other attorney who sends a demand letter $30,000 under the safe harbor provisions of the Act. So what's before you is this resolution which would initiate the process, which would culminate in the adoption of an ordinance and approval of district maps in the beginning or in March. And by adopting this resolution and completing the process, the city will avoid the cost not only of having to pay an attorney who sends a demand letter $30,000, but it would also avoid the cost of litigating a potential Voting Rights Act, which is what the attorney threatens if a city doesn't move to districts. There are many benefits to district-based elections, and we've highlighted some of those in the staff report. It is, it is less expensive for candidates to run in a smaller district than an entire city. And there is evidence that in some cases it can increase the voice of racial and linguistic minorities in a community. So I do want to emphasize that the city has no evidence that its election system violates the California Voting Rights Act. That this resolution of intent is a measure, a preemptive measure to avoid what is likely to be at some point a demand letter and the extra cost. If this resolution is passed, it does give the city manager authority to hire a professional demographer, which is necessary in order to fulfill this process. They've done this in hundreds of other cities, and they will walk the city through and the public through the process of looking at the communities of interest within the city and developing different maps. There's apparently mapping tools that even the public may even be able to use to draw their own maps, and there will be 5 hearings on this issue. So in addition to the authority for the city manager to hire a demographer, there's also a tentative timeline that's included. That's also required by the act as well. One other thing to note that was interesting in some of our discussions with some of the demographers that we have talked to, they said about half the cities that they work with are moving to districts without receiving a demand letter. So it's not uncommon for cities to do that, and we now know for certain that there's nothing that's stopping these attorneys from targeting cities the size of Sonoma. So otherwise, the information is in your staff report, and staff is here for questions if you have any.
I'm sorry, what are you asking for?
The staff report?
Here. Okay. Thank you, council. I will bring it to the city council. Any questions for staff? Yes or no?
Yes. So I just want to be very clear of what tonight we're agreeing to the process for the demographer to look at, and then would come back with options for how districts could be established. It doesn't mean that we're definitely moving to districts. It means that we are doing the analysis. Is that, I just want to make sure that we're absolutely clear on that.
Yes, that's correct. However, it's important to know that in order to avail ourselves of this provision that avoids the need to pay an attorney up to $30,000 for sending a letter, the city does have to complete the process and move to districts. So if the city were to at some point decide it no longer wanted to move forward with adopting an ordinance and moving to districts, at that point there would be nothing that would prevent an attorney from sending a demand letter, and at that point we would need to, the council would need to make the decision about whether or not they re-engage with a demographer and start the process all over, knowing that their exposure to attorney's fees is basically capped at $30,000, or whether or not they want to gather the evidence necessary to defend a lawsuit under the Voting Rights Act, which will incur substantial fees, not only for the city's attorney, but if the city were to lose, it would have to pay the prevailing party, the plaintiff's attorney's fees as well. And there are no cities that have successfully defended against a California Voting Rights Act claim, because the threshold that the legislature set is very low to show a violation.
Any other questions for staff? Seeing none, public comment. Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the council.
I move approval of the resolution.
Is there a second?
I will second that.
I have a motion and a second. I'd like to just make a comment. And I think I can speak on behalf of some of the council members up here. This is crazy.
Yeah.
And it's another excellent example of what comes out of Sacramento, what the legislation is doing with not even understanding perhaps what the unintended consequences are. And I'm pretty sure that nobody is happy that we even have to look at this. And I actually see some negatives to it. We have spent a lot of time in the years that I've been in this city of breaking down the barrier between the so-called West Side, East Side people. And I see this as an opportunity to actually compound differences between parts of the community. And I just feel that I need to voice that. I'm not happy about this, but I understand from a risk management perspective, this is probably the best route. So you've got a motion, you got a second. Mr. Wellender?
I too would like to just make a comment in part based upon discussions I've had with both Davids, because this too is something that's very troubling. I understand that if we move forward, that the demographer that we hire is someone who will provide the information appropriate for creating districts and guiding us through this process. I may be naive to think that in our particular town, the way it currently is, the four of us, and I'll add Jack, the five of us, do a very good job of when we make decisions, we're looking at the whole community, not for just our district. So I find this very disappointing to being, in essence, forced in this. So the discussion I had was that we start the process. The demographer is doing it just tailored for bringing closure on this process. But if we felt relatively confident that the city of Sonoma in its demographics or its peoples, and historically we have not violated the voting acts, we could hire, I suppose, a demographer number two and provide the data that would be necessary in order to go to court in case, in other words, to prove that we are not in violation of the Voting Act. I've been told that is possible, so we could ask ourselves, what price, if we could place on it, are we paying to go this route? I mean, in other words, what price by going to districts are we paying? And then if we decide that no, we have not violated this and we decide to go a different direction, is it worth going through that process? Because there probably would be a high probability that if we went that route and said, no, we're not going to district, we're going to stay at large, that we will get sued. Then the question is, what would that price be to defend ourselves if indeed we had what I would call the data, the documentation that says no? I'm afraid that it would be quite costly, even though it is something that I think is worth fighting for in theory. But I also am really troubled because I do not believe going in this direction is in the best interest of the community. However, we also have a fiduciary responsibility to our community, and if we embark down a pathway where we do know that we're going to be very vulnerable, that's unsettling too. So I just wanted to share that with you, because I did have this conversation with both our city manager and council. And as much as I was hoping for different answers, they chose not to humor me and just told me the truth.
Since we're making comments, which is in order with the motion on the floor, when I was on the school board, we elected, it used to be the custom, and not the custom, the law in Sonoma Valley, that you had to live in a particular district, but you were elected at large. So it made, so every area, in this case, there were at that time 5 elementary schools, and so I was in the Sasserini district, and someone was in the Dunbar district, et cetera. And Voting Rights Act attorney came forward and said, racially polarized voting, threaten a lawsuit. And we said, but we do it by district. People have to live in the district. So there is case law that says that is still considered at-large voting, because technically you're voting at large, and technically a certain percentage of people could sway the election, whatever. So then we decided, sort of running down the path you are, Ron, to do a demographic study to prove that there was no racially polarized voting in the school district, which we did. And we used one of the demographers that we're considering, top-rate demographer, who showed that there was no racially polarized voting in the district. Fast forward, new laws came into effect, new case law, and the district, as you know, now elects people by district. And so they went down that way. We pushed, and I bring it up only because we are a subset of that school district, and it didn't work then, and it won't work for us either. And I thought it was great that everyone voted and that people lived in the district. I thought that was a beautiful compromise, and now you'll find like there are none of those examples out there anymore. That basically that option is just non-existent. So, I'm one of those half full glass sort of people, whatever order of words that should be, and thinking that, it's a way to, incentivize people to look around their community and find good people to run for city council. I think it's a good time to do it because basically we are in different parts of the district now, and we have representatives all over. So it's not, I don't think it'll be a challenge, and hopefully we'll be successful. So anyway, that's my story.
All right, thank you. You good?
I'm good. I'm just saying, it's unfortunate that we're not able to approach this from what is the best thing for our community and move from there versus having to be locked into doing something. But I think we have another chance where this, after the first demographic report, and it'll probably make sense to go the same way that we're going now, but we do have another moment where we'll be able to look at the report and make another decision. So I think it's important for us to move ahead now. And, it is what it is, unfortunately.
All right. So, yes.
Mayor, I apologize. Before you make this motion, can I make one edit to the motion that you're going to make, Councilmember Lowe? Is just to provide clarity on where the budget is going to come from, because we want to be very clear. The budget will be coming from a budget amendment from the general fund reserve account to the city clerk elections account, so we can.
I'd like to amend my my motion to say that the budget will come from the reserve general fund account.
All right, that's been captured.
And if we can just get concurrence from the second.
Do you?
I will accept that.
Very good. All right, shall we call for a vote?
Vice Mayor Ferrer-Rivas,
Yes.
Councilmember Lowe,
Aye.
Councilmember Wellender,
With great reluctance, yes.
Mayor.
At
Mayor
large,
Green?
yes.
Thank you. The motion carries 4-0-1.
All right, I don't have my paperwork anymore in front of me, but adjourned.